go. So today's class is going to be going over RPR. RPR is the Realtor Property Resource. You guys have a link for this on your homepage of the MLS portal. So it's this little multicolored icon. As soon as you guys get signed into the MLS portal, you have access to that link. Now there is some registration required. So for those of you guys who have not used RPR before or have not registered for it before, you will have to go through a brief registration process, which requires information from NAR. So it'll just be asking for what email address you registered with NAR, or it'll ask for your NERDS ID, the NRDS ID. If you guys need any assistance with getting any of that information, you can always get in contact with us at the support desk. Now, since the webinar is actually going to be focused on just educating you at the moment, you don't necessarily have to participate. But if you guys are coming back to watch the recording of this, it might be a good idea to get registered just so that you can actually follow along and practice it in person for yourself. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with the script that they have for us. And we're good to go. All right. All right, so my name is Mike Dane. I'm the Outreach Technology Trainer for MLS Technology. Again, today's class is going to be covering RPR. Now, I did want to mention a couple things about RPR before we get too far. They have a brief message that they wanted us to pass along to you. At RPR, we know that you really want to be a wildly successful realtor. In order to do that, you need to close more deals. The problem is it's hard to differentiate yourself from the competition, which makes you second guess yourself. We believe our hard work should lead, or your hard work should lead to success. We understand how much is riding on your next deal, which is why we built the nation's largest property database exclusively for realtors. They have an ad as well.
As a realtor, you want the absolute best for your clients and customers. After all, buying or selling a property is one of the biggest decisions they'll make. But how can you provide them with the best information to make that decision? Typically, you could go to one place to get a few property facts, then to another place to research the local schools, and still another for local demographics. And for an even deeper dive, you could venture through several more places to learn the property history, what people are saying about the neighborhood, mortgage information, and so on. We understand you need to accurately assess what's best for your clients and customers, but the truth is, your time and money is being wasted tracking down all these facts from so many different places. That's where Realtors Property Resource comes in. RPR is the National Association of Realtors' exclusive nationwide property database for realtors. With access to over 160 million properties, RPR gives you access to the most comprehensive reports that are sure to inform and impress even the most demanding clients. No matter what your specialty is, RPR has partnered with hundreds of sources, including MLSs and CIEs across the country, to provide you with the most current, accurate, and valuable information in one centralized place. You will discover everything from school reports to census, demographics, tax data, foreclosures, mortgage information, mapping, distress data, flood zones, historic data, and so much more. That way, when your clients and customers come to you with every single question, you'll have every single answer. And because RPR is included in your NAR member dues, there is no additional cost. RPR, bringing realtors to the next level.
All right. So that's kind of just giving you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be going over a lot of different details about what RPR is. We're going to start off with dealing with the homepage, showing you guys where to go and what to find. We'll also be talking about customizing and updating your profile to make sure that whenever you are creating reports, you can get that information to clients with everything that is in relation to you, like your office information, phone number, contact information. All of that can be provided to them in these very customizable reports. You can also use RPR with the buyers and sellers, which is what we're actually going to focus on. We have some practical examples of how to deal with buyers and practical examples of how to deal with sellers. We're also going to be creating some reports. There's a whole variety of different reports that are available to you through RPR. I'll show you guys how to do a bunch of those. Actually, I don't know that we'll cover all of them, but hopefully we'll have a chance to. And then we're also going to talk about how to learn more, which is really important. So we're going to get started with that. I'm going to exit out of the slideshow. And I'm going to start up RPR. Now, one of the benefits of having this available through the MLS is that after you guys have gone through that registration process the first time, so just setting it up just the one time, and I'll always have access to getting directly into RPR from this link right here on my homepage of the MLS. So instead of having to always put in a username and password, I just click on the link and it jumps me directly in there. So let's take a look at this screen while I discuss what exactly is RPR. So RPR is a wholly owned subsidiary corporation. It's a national database of parcel-centric property information. And as you guys can see here, we have 159 current properties that are in the system. You guys can see this scrolling through, showing other statistics of the vast amount of information they have available. This is going to be coming from over 350 other sources. So we have MLSs that are available. We have a company called Niche that does all of the school reviews. So you can have reviews for schools, both from teachers, students, etc. We'll show you guys where to find those later. We got the U.S. Bureau of Labor, Census Bureau, all sorts of demographic information coming in as well. But we'll be looking at that as time goes on. This is, again, for exclusive use of Realtor members, so you must be a member of NAR in order to be able to have access to this. And this is also going to be delivered through a constantly evolving and leading edge application. They're coming out with updates, new features, all sorts of cool stuff on a relatively regular basis. It's really nice. We get emails every once in a while letting us know that there's some cool new feature, a couple of which I'll actually be covering during class. I'll point out that those are new. And again, as mentioned in the commercial, this is not something that you're being charged for. This is something that's already included in your member fees to NAR. And what that also means is that you're actually not going to have to worry about losing access to RPR if you end up moving to a different MLS, to a different state. All of this information will stay with you. I also wanted to mention this does not have a consumer or public front end. So with Matrix, if you guys end up sending any information to clients, there's a chance that they're going to be seeing information that's coming directly from Matrix. So it'll show you guys all sorts of information on the public side. So they have a portal that they can search in and they can save favorites and interact with you as the agent. With RPR, the only information that's coming out and going to the public are the reports that you're creating in here. So I'll show you guys how to create those. But again, that's the only level of interaction that anybody has from the public side with RPR, is just the things that you've created. Now, as far as the types of data that are going to be available in RPR, as we go through and we start looking at some of these properties, we're going to see that there's sections that say, effectively telling us where this information is coming from, how frequently it's updated, giving us some basic information about each of these. So we have MLS data, the public records, so tax information is coming in. Again, the demographic information coming from ESRI, the US Census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, all that stuff. Now, if any of that gets to be a little bit confusing or cumbersome, each section of information is going to show you a little synopsis of where that's coming from, but there's always going to be a help button down at the bottom right-hand corner. In fact, no matter where you are in RPR, you'll always notice this little yellow button to help you get whatever you're working on at that moment taken care of. All right, so just to cover what RPR does not do, RPR is not an MLS. They don't end up having any of your listing information put in directly into RPR. It's always going to be pulling the listing information from the MLS. They also don't have any consumer-facing business model. So as mentioned, there's no portal, there's no interaction from the public side. It's all just for realtors exclusively. And they also don't do any listing syndication or redistribution. And again, it's only going to be available to the realtor members of the National Association of Realtors. Now, as far as what we're going to be doing in RPR, and again, this is all going to be part of what our class is going to be covering, you can use RPR to research property details, so finding out beds, baths, price, etc., and additional information such as notice of defaults, mortgage, tax information, etc. You can use RPR to determine the best price for a property. I'm actually going to show that as a practical example for the sellers a little bit later. You can use that for comp analysis, refining the price, etc. You can use this to farm new areas, even including bank-owned properties. And you can impress new and returning clients with the customizable branded reports. And actually, one of the first things that we're going to do is help you guys make sure that those are branded properly. But again, it's going to help you stand out at your listing appointments, anything that you guys are doing, open houses, buyers tours. Those RPR reports and even using RPR mobile is going to be incredibly helpful. So before we start interacting with the system as a whole, so how to search, how to find things, I do want to make sure that our profile is updated. So before we start covering any of these search functions and everything else, I'm going to go up to this little cogwheel icon up at the top right corner. This is our settings button, and this provides us access to making sure that our profile is up to date and making sure that all of our settings are set to the way that we would like to use them. So on our profile page, we want to make sure that we have a current photo of ourselves, whatever the photo is that you guys are using everywhere else. And just as a basic guideline for any branding that you guys are doing, always make sure that you have the same consistent photo, the same consistent logo. Even fonts are going to be important. It's going to take people a lot of time seeing your face and your name in order for you to kind of be something that they register as a connection. So if you have different photos in different places, they're not going to be able to remember you as easily as if they see that same photo on your Facebook that they see when you send stuff out through Matrix or when you send them a report through RPR. So always make sure that those are all consistent. And then always make sure that you have the correct logo in there too. Every once in a while we'll get calls and it's people that have the old office that they were working with coming out on reports. This is where you can edit that. Same thing goes with your contact information. Make sure that this is all up to date. You notice we have the office information, the address. Mine needs to be updated. It looks like I still got our quote unquote old address. That doesn't have our current address in there. I've got a phone number in here. Got the office number, mobile phone number. You can add more. You can put in your fax number in case you're working with somebody from 1999. I think you can even put in a pager. Yeah. Make sure your email is up to date, your website. There is a section down here that's actually not going to be related to any of your personal information. This is actually going to be your connection to any of the MLSs. Now, by default, you should actually already be connected to MLS technology. If you are not, or if you guys are a part of another MLS, you can always go through and in this section add in any CIEs that you're connected to or any other MLSs that you're connected to. We have a full list, allows you to get access to all of the information from that MLS. Now, there are some MLSs that do not actually share their information with RPR for whatever reason. If you guys do end up wanting to gain access to the MLS information through RPR, you can still do so. They just don't share that information out to anyone else. That's effectively how that works. So like, for instance, if you guys are part of the Northeast Oklahoma Board of Realtors, their information does get delivered to RPR, but again, not shared. So if you guys want to see that information, you'd have to actually get yourself added here. You put in your MLS information, hit add, and then you'll have access to that. And in fact, if you guys are interested to see what's being shared and by what associations, you can go down to this listing data access, and it'll show you all of the information. So for instance, these are all the MLSs that share information with us. We've got the one in Oklahoma City, the one in Lawton, the one in Duncan. They're all sharing. If you guys want to see this ones that don't, it's these guys. And again, if you guys sign in and connect yourself with the North Central Board of Realtors MLS, they've got all the information on there. It's just that it's not being shared with any of the other members, any of the other realtors. All right. We do have a section down here for assistant users. It's important to note when you guys are looking at this, the assistant users, this is not meant for you guys to give people public access. This is only going to be for if you guys have an assistant that needs to generate reports for you or whatever the case may be. All right. Now, if we go back up to the top, again, where we had our logo, etc., over on the right-hand side, we can see our member information for the National Association of Realtors. I had to get in contact with them to get a fake Nerds ID set up for me so I can have access to this system. But you can also set your password in here if you guys have a need to sign into RPR outside of just using the links that we provide you in the MLS. Set your time zone, any apps, and then the mobile access. This shows you just all of the devices that you have RPR currently connected to. So I've got my work phone, my iPad, and my iPhone. You can get rid of those if you ever need to. All right. Now, if you've made any changes to this, you'll notice that up here at the top, we had that save button that just kind of floats there with us. So once you guys have made any changes to this, make sure to hit save. Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right. Now let's talk about, so we've just covered our profile section. Now let's talk about the settings. Now you might notice that mine is actually maxed out. So I have all of these set to the maximum amount for both residential and commercial. The reason being, oftentimes, especially when I'm going out to rural areas, the information isn't going to be quite as dense as it is, let's say, like even here in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, where there's just tons of properties for sale, tons of properties in the area. So I usually set these to the max just so that when I am working in rural areas, I can see everything that's happened. Now, as time goes on, you may want to limit this depending on where you're working, or you may want to do the same thing that I've done and just max that out. Now, the section down below that is our home areas. When we get back to our home screen, I'm going to show you what this directly relates to, but the home areas are effectively going to be your stomping grounds. So for instance, if I am always working in Ada and I want to make sure that I can see the market reports for Ada really quickly, I can add that as a home area. And what that'll show me is a quick search that shows all of the properties, what's happening in the areas, new listings, new sold, anything that had a price increase or decrease, whatever the case may be. That's what they consider your home areas. So for me, I actually just went through and added in all of the locations that I go to teach. And so what that allows me to do is whenever I show up at a location, I can just click on the market report for Ada and find out what's happening in that area, or click on the market report for Eufaula and find out what's going on. Oh, and Kristen asked, in home areas, you can't go by county. No, unfortunately, as big as it gets, it only does the cities. And in fact, if I wanted to add a city, so for instance, I'm going to do, I think Muskogee was a good example. If I wanted to add in Muskogee as a home area for myself, I do Muskogee. And what it's providing to me here is a list of all of the zip codes. And then there's one that doesn't have a zip code that's actually going to just collect everything that's a Muskogee address. And that's typically the option that you might want to stick to. Again, unless you've got a specific zip code that you're interested in. But yeah, unfortunately, no, like Creek County isn't going to pop up. It does have to be a city or zip code. Oh, and actually it even says that here on the text. I guess I should have read that. City and state, zip. And for whatever reason, Oklahoma doesn't have too many neighborhoods. As far as I know, there's only 8 codified, quote unquote, neighborhoods here. But we'll be looking at that a little bit later. All right. So I'm happy with the settings I have here. I added in Muskogee, so I'm going to hit save. Now this time when I save, I'm going to see that little pop-up window letting me know, hey, everything is saved. There's a link there for the home page, which is where we're going to go next. Oh, perfect. All right. So back to our home page. And just as a reminder, this is where you're going to land whenever you use the RPR link here on the home page of our MLS portal. So when we get here, this actually has a workflow that's kind of built into the menu up here at the top. So on the home page, we see that we have a bunch of search options. We can go back to any properties that we viewed recently. any searches that we had conducted recently, or even any reports or notes that we'd added to properties. Now, once we've done a search, that'll provide us the results. So effectively, when you guys are looking at this, we see that we start on our homepage. As soon as we've actually started a search, that brings us to our results. As soon as we found the result that we need, it brings us to our details. And then as soon as we found the property that we're looking for, so like if I clicked on this property down here, it would bring me into the details section. And then I can produce a report that I can send out to the client. So again, the workflow that they would like you to go through is pretty clearly lined out right up here at the top in the menu. And we're going to be discussing exactly how to use each of these really quickly. So before we get too far into that, I did want to point out on our homepage for the search functions. So again, from home, we have our search functions here. We can search for all properties. Again, that's going to be 159 million properties, over 159 million properties. That's going to include things that are on market, off market, potentially for sale by owner. There's just tons of properties in the system. And again, you'll see all of that information through here, no matter which state you're going to, no matter what properties you guys might be looking at, whether it's residential or if you guys need to switch over to commercial. The for sale is going to limit it to just the properties that are for sale in the listing data. So it's important to recognize that even though we have access to looking at every single property, the only things that are going to be showing as for sale are going to be the properties that have been explicitly listed through a listing service. So you're not going to be able to find out whether or not somebody does have a property for sale by owner. You'll have access to all of their tax information and everything that the county assessors provided, and again, 350 different sources of information. So lots about the properties. But if it's for sale on some rinky-dink website or some third party, we're not going to be able to see that. It has to have been listed through a listing service. Same thing goes for our for lease section. Now we do have a section here for neighborhoods, which allows us to do searches for neighborhoods. Again, Oklahoma doesn't have too many official neighborhoods, so the search function for this isn't going to be quite as useful, but we do have a function to search by zip code as well. So you can do just neighborhood searches that are city, zip, or county. We also have a section here for schools. School search is really handy. Typically, I recommend people to use the zip code for that one. If you pull up the city, it's going to find every single school. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then finally, we have the market activity, which allows us to search by city, zip, county, or township. Now, it's worth mentioning when we go to our home areas in a moment here, again, our home areas was limited to cities and zip codes. If you guys do want to do a search for a whole county, you can go to the market activity report and you can find it by county. Now, I'm going to go back to this all properties section just for some general information. And let's take a look at this saved option over here on the left-hand side. So we have all of these search functions that allow us to search for new information. But let's say that we want to go back to something that we've already built or some properties that we've already saved. That's actually what this little drop down here is for. So when you click on this drop down, it's going to show us an options directly from my current listings. So if I have any listings in the system, I can go look at those. And if I need to send a report off to somebody, this is the easiest way to get back to those. But we do have properties that we can save. So as time goes on, I'm going to be showing you guys specific properties. If I have a client that's interested in one of those properties, there's a little star that I can add to it that'll save that property. I can even give it a special name. We have searches as well, so you can pre-build a search. So if I had a specific area in town, I can draw on the map, make a specific space, set certain criteria, and then save that search for me to be able to jump back into it. Same way that we do in Matrix. And then we also have our custom areas. We're going to cover this briefly a little bit later when we look at the map. And then down here, we have market activity in my home areas. So remember when we were in our profile, we set up those home areas. And here I have my spot for Muskogee. So this runs the market activity for that area. So instead of having to, go through and get to the market activity thing, type in Muskogee, make sure that I'm choosing the one that's not going to include the zip codes, I can just click on this drop down to the left. scroll down here to the market activity area, and then click on Muskogee. And this shows me all of the market updates for Muskogee. So that way I can see what's new, what's pending, any recently distressed properties, any recently sold properties. So it makes it really easy to just jump in and find out what's happening in your area. All right. So now let's talk about our search functions. So on the all properties, again, this is going to be finding anything and everything that's available as far as the tax records are concerned. So we're going to have information about properties that are not on market right now. So for instance, if you guys are going to be doing a listing presentation, you're going to want to use this all properties search, and then you can find out more information about the property, produce a report. You guys can do the comp analysis, which I'll show you guys how to do in a bit here. And you can use all of those functions. Again, for sale is going to be limited to just the properties that are listed. But we're going to do an all property search first. So let's pretend that we're actually working with a seller. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that I go to the all properties search, because hopefully the property isn't currently for sale. And then when we get here, I'm going to actually search for a specific property. Let's do 1373 South Riverside Drive in Tulsa. There we go. Actually, I don't know that it actually includes the, perfect, there we go. Now it's automatically filling it. So we've got 1373 Riverside Drive. When I'm searching for one property, so instead of it going to my results, when I search for one specific property, it's going to skip the results because it recognizes I only have one thing searched and go directly into my details. So notice now our arrow is pointing up at the details. And from here, I can see that I have a property that's off market. Looks like the last time it was sold was in 2012. We have some basic information up at the top here. We're going to be discussing all of this in a minute. We see our basic facts about the property. We can find out if it's a single family residence, what the living area is. And we've got the photos. If this was a listed property, this would be showing our photos from the listing. We've got spaces for us to add notes. I've got property details. We've got the home facts according to the public record information. And then also we can make changes for ourselves. So again, if we're dealing with a seller, I can actually update the information about this property, make sure that it's all correct. So if they, for instance, in Tulsa County, for whatever dumb reason, they don't have the bedroom information. So I can add that information in here so that I can have the notes about that whenever I start actually getting all of the listing data put into the system. Same thing goes with total baths. Let's say that they've actually increased how many bathrooms they have because they've done some expansion. We can note that information in here. So it makes it really easy to start collecting the information even before you've started officially filling out those property data forms. They've got the living area. Maybe they expanded the living area, so I can add that information in here. And then save all of that so that by the time I get back, I'm good to go, including any notes that I'm putting on here, added bathrooms, added partial bath. We can see we've got a median estimated home value, interior details, exterior details, location, the schools that are in the vicinity. It's important to note that they do delineate between the schools based on location. So for instance, this is just showing proximity. And then we also have the listing data. So for instance, if this was a listed property, whatever the schools are that the listing agent had connected to that listing are going to be shown over here. So hopefully this is going to be the collection of information that you can trust, whereas again, this is just going to be showing what's nearby. We have the legal information, mortgage records if it's available, tax information, deed records, and if there was any distressed information, that would also be shown down here as well. So for instance, if there was any foreclosure records, all that kind of stuff, it would be down here. Now we also have a section up here at the top that shows our history for this property. The history for the property is going to cover just showing any listing activity, any financial stuff that had happened, so like mortgage information, any of the assessed values. Some of the information here is going to be more dense than others. So I'm going to show you guys a property in a bit here that has way more information on this screen. It's all going to depend on the market, and it's all going to depend on that particular property. All of the information is going to be collected on a parcel specific basis. So in this case, not a lot of activity. You can add your own notes to clarify that. You can see all of the previous sales. This is showing us just the information from the public records. We can also switch this over to the listing records. If we scroll down further, we've got our tax assessment information, and we've got a section here for us to be able to move back and forth between each of the years in the past. Mortgage record information, again, another next and previous section. And our distressed info, oh, excuse me, I think I misspoke earlier. The distressed info is going to be at the bottom of this history screen. There we go. Oh, and we got a question. Is the property value area the same as a tax record or a little bit more accurate than TR? Oh, than the tax record. The property value is actually going to be something that's going to include any assessments that are done on the property. So notice here we've got assessed value or assessor market value. And these are just going to be general, sometimes even automated things that are showing up there. But the property value in general, it's best to review that on the home page. And we're actually going to talk about the RVM and the AVM in just a moment here as well. Now, one of the things that's been moving along with us over on the right-hand side of the screen, as we've been going through and looking at the summary, the history, and the charts, we do have the effectively just the basic information about the zip code, the city, and also the state. So if you notice when I'm on my summary screen, if I scroll down just a little bit, I've got how this zip compares. So it allows you to see this extra context even when you're on different tabs. But on this chart screen, this is actually where we're going to see, again, everything broken down by the zip code. So this is also going to match how this zip compares, Oh, and I see that we got another question. I'll address that in just a moment here. When we get to this chart screen, or even if you guys are interested on the right-hand side about what this information is and where it's coming from, here's where the different sources of information are really going to shine. We have about this data, which allows us to see where this information is coming from. We've got public records data. We've got information, here we go, about this data. This is going to be on-market and off-market listing sources, inventory of distressed properties, public records. Where is, oh, here we go. Yeah, more listing data, as well as public records. And see, we also have a section here for update frequency. So the good news is if we do end up producing a report that includes any of these pieces of information, just like if you're looking at a USA Today article, it's going to give you this explanation on the report. So even though when we're looking at this as a realtor, we probably know exactly what this is referring to, but we can find out more information over here on the side if we want. When the report is produced, it'll automatically include this information for the benefit of the people that are reading it. Our audience, obviously in this case, is going to be the buyers or sellers or whoever you're producing the report for. All right, and we have a question. What are the pluses and minuses on the school? In fact, actually, when we're looking at any of the school information, so whether you're looking at it on that summary screen where it just shows the, oh, did I miss it? Oh, here we go. On our summary screen where it shows our schools nearby or any schools that are listed for this property, or even over here on the right that shows the nearby schools. All of these are just going to be the scores that have been applied by the reviews that have been put into a system called Niche, which is a school review system. Now, bear in mind, and we'll talk about those school reports in a bit here, these school grades that they've given are kind of just, it's based on people that have gone to Niche and actually reviewed the school. So you can get really positive reviews from people or really negative reviews. It's not typical to get a lot of middling reviews because nobody's going to go out of their way to say, yeah, it was all right. But if you go to any of these schools' information, you can find out more about them. They actually show just this specific school by comparison to Tulsa Public Schools in general. So just showing you an average score here, how many total enrolled, et cetera, et cetera. And there's also a section down here at the bottom to see reviews for this school. And again, as mentioned, you're going to be dealing with reviews that are being put in by people that are either very happy with the school, very not happy with the school. So sometimes you want to include those reviews in the reports, but there's an option to not include them as well, just because Lord knows sometimes those reviews are no holds barred. So, and as you guys notice, as soon as I clicked on one of the schools, it actually brought me to a new screen. I'm going to go back one more step so I can see the property that we were dealing with. All right. So now that we've covered a little bit about the reports, let's talk about this RVM up here at the top. So some of you may be familiar with what an AVM is, but we're going to cover that real quick just so you guys are familiarized again. Let's bring this back up on the screen. There we go. So when you, oops, can you just, oh, well, it's covering up my notes. Give me just a second here. There we go. So in RPR, you're going to see value estimates for properties, and they're either going to be labeled AVM or RVM. So in AVM, which you guys have access to through lots of different systems, Realist has an AVM, Zillow has their own AVM, which they have branded the Zestimate, which I imagine you guys are probably familiar with at this point. But the AVM is an automated valuation model. And what that does is it just estimates a calculation of the value using a lot of the publicly accessible information. Now, what that means is that they could be pulling the same information for Zillow and Realist, but they're both producing different numbers. And that reason is because they have different proprietary formulas, proprietary algorithms that they're creating this value estimate with. Now, with RPR, RPR actually has their own proprietary format, which is called the RVM, which is the Realtor's Valuation Model. Now, this estimate is actually going to be calculated using, again, publicly accessible information, but they're also going to be including a lot of the MLS information, both sold and off-market data. So that means that they're going to be pulling from way more sources of information than even Zillow would have access to. Same thing with our Realist. Realist also pulls a lot of information in as well, just to make sure that they have as much information to give you an accurate estimate as possible. Now, as far as the RVM goes, at the moment, it is actually one of the highest accuracies of any product that's available. If I'm not mistaken, it is, in fact, actually the most accurate. But I did want to mention as well, the RVMs are going to be displayed for a property only if the criteria for accurate results are fulfilled. So what that means is that with an AVM, you're going to be dealing with just, again, general information. If there's enough information around, maybe it'll produce an accurate number. With the RVM, it won't even bother stepping up from an AVM to an RVM unless there's certain information criteria met. So you always want to make sure that if you see an RVM, take that into consideration as a very reliable source. Now, when we're looking at these, there's going to be different star ratings. And of course, this kind of feels a little bit like that scene in Anchorman. 60% of the time, it works all the time. But with 5-star ratings, that means that the sales price is going to be likely to be within 10% of the estimate 90% of the time. Next step down, 4 stars is going to be within 15%. Oops. Within 20%, for 3 stars, 25, 30%. So let me show you guys what that looks like. So we have a property here. Again, this is our property that we're working with. It's got an RVM of $299,000. And it shows me down here, I've got an RVM estimated range. So instead of just giving me a specific number, which again, sometimes these numbers are actually down to the dollar, which is always unusual. But with the range here, we can see that there's actually a pretty narrow range relatively, about $60,000 difference. But when we get down to our RVM confidence, we can see that this has actually been given 5 stars. So just to reiterate, when you guys are looking at the, come on, where did the button go? There we go. With the 5-star rating, what that means is that they anticipate that the sales price will be within 10% of what the AVM was 90% of the time. So outliers, like it's a lakefront property, and of course none of the properties nearby were lakefront, so it's not really getting an accurate measurement. That's what that extra 10% of variance is anticipated to be. So we've got the 5-star rating for this one. So really, they're actually hoping that this is what it's going to be. And again, within 10% of that, if it's not going to be that around that exact price. Now, we can refine this a little bit further. So again, if we're dealing with a seller, we can actually edit that refined value. I'm actually going to go back to my home page, and let's do a search instead for a different property. Give me just a second. I have a really good example property here that I want to use. And actually, while I'm waiting for this to load, I see that we got a question as well. Let me answer that question real quick. Would I use that RVM value to help determine the sales price? Yes. And in fact, that's actually what we're going to do in just a moment here. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. So we're going to do a search for some properties up in the zip code 74115. There we go. So I'm going to do my search. And again, what I'm doing right now is I'm actually searching for all properties in this vicinity. And remember, homepage to results, to details, and then finally to reports. So we're on our results page right now. I have my map nice and big at the top here. So it's going to show me an overview of all of the area that I've searched for. Notice it's got that little border there. If I want to get this out of the way, I can hit this button down here that says smaller map. And then I can just see all of the properties that are in that area. It'll show me anything that's off market with that little off market tag. If I wanted to see everything that was just for sale, I can limit my search that way. But again, there's a whole search just for the stuff that's active. And then we also have the option just to zoom in on the map and conduct a search in that one specific area. So I can see all of the properties here. There's a lot of different places. But in my case, I actually have a specific property in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my home page. Client finally gave me the address specifically. So I'm going to do 4814 Mohawk. Perfect. Here we go. So I've got the specific property. So just like if I had done my search and clicked on the specific property from my results, it brings me to my details page. And I can see that I have an AVM instead of an RVM. And again, all that's indicating to me is just that the minimum requirement of information was not met for this particular property to produce an RVM. Now it's still giving me an AVM because there's just enough information for it to produce that. But remember how when we were looking at a 5-star RVM, it was a little bit under 60,000, almost 50,000 price range difference for a property that's, $300,000. This one is actually giving me a much, much broader range, 160-something thousand, and it's giving me an AVM of just one star. So this isn't a property that it has an accurate estimate of the value. So in this case, what I can do is I can go to either refine the RVM, or in this case, an AVM. And what it provides for me is a bunch of spaces for me to verify the information. So in this case, I know that there's 3 bedrooms there. They've got a full bathroom and 1 partial bathroom. And the total living area currently they haven't changed that. That stayed the same. It's a nice big property, coincidentally with an abandoned skating rink on it. I think they're renovating that, whoever the current owners are. Year built. If they've done any home improvements, we can do that. And I forgot to apply this. There we go. That increased our value, because what it's doing is it's finding out what the average value is for bedrooms in that area, and then increasing the value of the property based on that average value. This is all being done by algorithm, so it's not going to necessarily give you the exact number. So like for instance, if I set this back to 0, it'll decrease it a little bit. But since it didn't have information about the bedrooms. Next, we have our home improvements. If there was a home improvement that they did, like when I first met these people, they had a brand new kitchen that they had just done. It was a really nice upgrade. So we can put that in there. Date completed. And let's see, 2010 maybe. Sure, add. And what that did is it took the cost, it depreciated the value of what had been added to it and put that in. And again, right up here at the top, we can see our refined value, the original estimate based on the AVM, and then the changes that it's added in here. So including the partial bathroom addition and including the kitchen upgrade that they did a decade ago. So any improvements that they need to make. So for instance, rundown barn. I don't know. I don't know what the actual value is of that, but we'll add that on there. Now, as far as the local market conditions, maybe they're not particularly great. So we can, this is all going to be subjective. This is where your expertise as a realtor is going to come into play. The exterior of the house is really nice. The interior of the house is way better than anything else in the area. Same thing goes with the lot size. The lot size is huge by comparison to some of the other properties. The view is also pretty nice. Lots of trees in the area. There's a lake across the street. And the privacy is also fantastic. I mean, it's the corner lot where there's hardly any houses nearby. So, and all of this, again, is just relative. This is where your expertise as a realtor is going to come into play. You make the choices on these, and you notice it actually gives it a dollar value down here at the bottom. So actually, I'm going to remove this barn addition. So now we can see that the property's value has been increased. So again, we show that additional partial bathroom. We show that nice home improvement. And again, we increased a lot of these because relatively speaking, this is actually a much nicer house than most of the properties in that area. And so we have our value up here at the top with the additional changes. And now we have a new value. So if I go back to my summary, I can now see that I have my AVM and my refined value. And if I were to produce a report on this property, I can include my refined value on there so that they can see that we're putting in our expertise as a realtor to give them a more accurate estimate of what its true value should be. Then when we go to the listing agreement, we can make sure to include that information on there, and they can make a choice on what the price should be in their eyes. Another question, when you refine an AVM or RVM, does it only save the info to my account only, or are there other realtors that search this property? Actually, all of this information that I've just put in is only accessible by me. Not even other people in my office will see the refinements that I've made to this. So you never have to worry about like increasing its value and that being calculated into another realtor's thing. All of this is going to be on a user by user basis. So if you go through and start taking photos, adding notes, changing the property details to match what's correct, all of that information is going to be kept on your account so that you have access to that. And it's worth mentioning, we're going to talk about the mobile app in the second hour of class, which we're actually due for a break here soon. But in the second hour of class, we'll be talking about the mobile app. When you guys add notes, take photos, change details, everything that you're doing on the mobile version, all of that information is saved to your account so that you have the exact same information accessible from your desktop version and vice versa. So any of these changes that I've made to the Brownwoods property, I'm going to be able to see when I get back to my mobile app. Now, once I'm done with this property information, if I want to get this sent out to my seller, I have the Create a Report button over here on the right. When I click on Create a Report, it brings me to a new page that shows me all of the various reports that we have access to. So maybe just to reiterate one more time, we got to our home page, we did a search. If we were searching for one property, we skipped the results, but you can see all of the results for your search on that page. When you jump into a specific property, it goes to details. And again, the next step then would be to take the details and put them into a report. So that's where we're at right now. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the reports later as well, but just to give you guys a quick overview, if I have a seller that's wanting to maybe start getting all of that process done, I can choose the seller's report. I can see that it's got a whole bunch of details in here. I can choose to hide those or show them. In this details section, we can see all of the different parts and pieces of the report. So if there's something that we don't want to include when we create this report, we can just uncheck the checkbox for that. So for instance, at the moment, I have all of the market activity information unchecked. If I wanted to include that, just to give them a little bit more context on why it is that I've given them the price that I have, I can include those on there so that they can see that. Now that is going to dramatically increase how long this report is. And in fact, if you guys are interested in seeing how long this report is going to be right now, you can hit show sample, which is going to be available for every report. And that allows you to just go through and see what this is going to look like once it's actually been produced. It says down here, seller report will be about 75 pages. I've produced a couple reports that are the seller's report that are like 80 or 90 pages. I've produced some in rural areas where it only ended up being like 40 or 50 pages. But again, it's going to depend on what's available in that area. And that's part of the reason why, if you want to include the market activity information, you can, but that's going to dramatically increase how large this seller's report is. But again, the seller might need that information, so that's important for them. We've got a question. Let me finish this real quick and then I'll jump back into that. So I'm going to scroll down. I've got all of the parts and pieces of this report ready. And at the very bottom of this page, we see that we can personalize our report. So in this case, I can send this off to the individual that's the owner. There we go. Oops, and actually I put that's where their name goes. There we go. And excellent. And I can send this off to the individual down here at the bottom using this delivery method option. I can just send it by email, which allows them to get that information as soon as it gets produced. In our case, I'm actually just going to do this display now option, which allows me just to see that report as a PDF. So I'm going to hit run report. There we go. And again, this seller's report is being produced. Up at the top of my screen, there's going to be that reports button, and it'll show me the number of reports that I've produced today. And I can always go back and see that right up here at the top. Oh, actually, here, I'm going to have the doorbell sound on. So when this report is actually produced, it's going to play a little noise, and that little doorbell icon here is actually indicating to me that it's going to play that sound. And that's when I know that the report has been created. Now, let's actually talk quickly about what this looks like from the buyer's perspective. So I'm going to go back to home, and I'm going to go to the for sale option. And let's do a different choice. Let's do 74120. So I've got a specific location that I'm searching for, but in this case, maybe I've gotten out to take some people on a showing tour, and they take a look at a property that's across the street, and they're like, hey, I want to know more about that particular property. You guys can use RPR to find out information about those properties on the go, but when you guys are on the desktop version, you're going to have to limit yourself to doing a search for properties based on any of these criteria: address, city, zip, county, or if you guys have an MLS number already, you guys can see that there. So I'm going to do a search for this particular zip code. And when we were talking earlier about the profile and the settings, that settings page defined how many properties will actually be shown on the map at the same time. So in our case, I can see that I've got a bunch of different properties that are for sale in this area. I can choose not to include anything that's been marked as pending, just in case my client is only interested in active properties. All of these filters over here on the left-hand side will help you define what's going to be appearing in our results. If you make any changes to this, so like if you're just interested in 3+ bedrooms, 2+ bathrooms, you check those filters just like in Amazon and hit apply. and that'll narrow down your search to just the 16 properties that happen to match that. And I also wanted to mention as well, if you guys are wanting to do a search for your seller or your buyers and narrow down those other attributes, the other criteria before then, when you're on your homepage and you're creating your search, over on the right-hand side, there's the advanced option, which allows us to define that information beforehand. So like we already have our beds and baths put in, it remembers that, but I'm gonna choose not to include anything that's pending and make sure that I don't include anything that's distressed as well. There we go. And now when I produce my search, it's going to have those filters already built in. So I've gotten down to only 10 properties. And again, I can see those all tagged on the map here. All right, and actually it looks like my report got produced. So I have that seller's report. I'm going to click download, and we're going to take a look at this and then answer that question. We'll take our break. So here's my seller's report that I produced. Zoom this out a little bit so you guys can see that. So this is the name that I had given that particular property. It shows that it's presented by, it's got Mike Dane, got all my contact information on here. There's my text that I said, here's the seller's report. And I can see that I've got the current estimated value and then our refined value. This is the one that we custom made for them. We've got some property details. It even highlights for me the stuff that I've manually made changes to so that they can see that I'm adding that information on their behalf to make sure that they get a correct number. Details, home facts. So it's worth pointing out up here at the top of the screen, we see that there's 43 pages to this particular property. It does include all of the subjective things that I made changes to. It includes any of the other things that I've added. So the home improvement, it shows when it was, what its cost was, and then of course the depreciated value for it. Historical photos, lots of charts, lots of details, assessed value. We even see a map that shows a little bit of a heat map showing all of the market activity for that area. Notice this is a relatively low activity area. It's probably part of the reason why it produced only an AVM instead of an RVM. And then again, all of these charts, remember earlier I mentioned that those charts will actually have an explanation for them over on the side. So these reports are really beneficial. Each of them does have a different collection of information. So it's important to recognize that if you guys are going through and creating reports for people, always, always, always double check to see what the report will look like. So just produce the reports for all sorts of different properties and find out what each of them does and what their value might be to you. But we're going to talk about reports a little bit more in the second hour. Now, let's take a look at this question. Is there a way to search for new builds only? How far back does the data go? 1, 2 years? Or do we set that? As far as new builds, as long as there's no tax record information, it's not going to appear in any of these systems. The new builds that are going to be in RPR are going to be any of the properties that have been listed through an MLS. As far as the historical data goes, this historical data doesn't have a limit on how far back it goes. I found information in here that's like tax sales from the 90s. So it's all going to depend on how much information is available, and that's going to all depend on the MLS that's provided that data and the tax records that are available for that property. Yeah, that's a good question. All right, so we are due for a break. Let's take a 10-minute break, and I will see you guys back at 10:14. All right, if you guys see the video stop and the music stops, that means that we're going back to it. So just keep an eye out. Oh, there it goes. All right. Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started again. I don't know how to make the screen flash for everybody so that they know that we need to get back started again. But hopefully you guys are all back. So we're going to cover now how to deal with buyers searches. So obviously this is a great tool for when you guys are working with any of your sellers, but I want to cover some of the options a little bit more thoroughly for what the buyers are going to need from you and what RPR can produce for you. So I'm going to go back to my homepage and we're going to do a search. Again, we're going to do a search this time for something that's for sale. So I'm going to find properties that are in the area. Let's do a search again for a specific area. And I'm going to go back to my advanced. Let's cover a couple more of these options. So we show that we have our listing status, whether we want to have anything that's distressed or just stick to things that are not distressed. We can put in specific living areas. We can clarify which kind of property types we're interested in case maybe they don't want to do any co-ops or condos. They just want a house, so the single family residence. You can choose that. Will we be covering CMAs and RPR? I can briefly cover that. Yeah, it's actually relatively easy. And in fact, we actually have a section here that's going to be covering that in a moment anyways. Actually, yeah, we'll get that for you. And then down here at the bottom, we have our space for your build, but we have a section for RVM to list price ratio. So if you guys are wanting to find out if a property is maybe going to be a good deal, or if a property does happen to, let's say, have a higher price than what the RVM is, maybe that's actually a really nice property for the area. So we might want to set our maybe more discerning buyer up with that particular property. We can use this to try and sort that out. So for instance, I'm going to go do the over 120%, and I'll find the properties in this area that are, hopefully there's some results for that. Let's find out. Oh, yep, didn't find anything. So we can make some changes to that. Again, all of our filters are going to be here on the side. I'm going to go back down here. Let's do this one instead. This was producing results earlier, but it appears, oh, you know what? I think I chose the wrong zip code. That's okay. Let me start over. There we go. Go down to my advanced and clear that out. There we go. And again, let's take a look at our results. So when we're looking at our results, we have a couple different options for how we can view this. So just like when you guys are doing searches in Realist or even in Matrix, you can do a search by the map, or you guys can see the list. And of course, the list is relatively simple. We can just move the map out of the way by making it bigger or smaller, and we can see our list of all the properties. We can filter this with more results, have it sort by price, how many days on market, etc. But in my case, I actually want to use the map to do the search. I'm going to make the map bigger, and I can zoom in on the area and see if I can find what I'm looking for by just clicking on this property. I can see the property information, it's for sale, what its price is, and there's a button here for more details. So I have one that I wanted to use as an example, which I am not seeing on the map. Oh, that's why. Ah, yeah, bathrooms, that's what it was. There we go. Now we've got more of these options. All right. So let's take a look at this one right here. Perfect. So I'm going to go to more details. And this pulls up our property information. We can see that we've got a list price that was put in, 569,000. The RVM for this is actually a little bit lower. And what this allows us to do is we can actually create a CMA for this to find out maybe if this is actually a relatively accurate list price, or if maybe the agent has artificially inflated this a little bit. Because if you notice, even our RVM range is a little bit lower than what this list price currently is. So even though we're actually looking at a property that's already been listed, so we're not dealing with trying to refine its value to produce an actual listing agreement and get it put onto the market, I'm actually wanting to make sure that the CMA is created to let me know that this list price is accurate. So before we get too far into that, I did want to point out a couple extra things in here. When we're looking at the home facts for a property that's on market right now and has listing information in the system, we can see that we have this delineated by public facts, showing us all of the information that's on the tax record. And then we see our listing facts, which shows us what the listing agent entered for this particular property. So we can see we have the bedrooms as 3 bedrooms. Obviously that's missing from our public records. We can see that we have 3 total bathrooms, 3 of which are full bathrooms. And the living area is actually smaller than it was previously, though the lot size is actually larger. So hopefully they've had some kind of assessment that's going to produce those correct numbers. The listing information also includes the carport for the garage size, etc. So again, all of that's separated out by tax record and listing information. You can add notes again. And then down here towards the bottom, I'm going to show you guys the schools section again. This shows us the listing data, which shows us which schools they're going to be going to. So elementary, middle, and high school. So we've got all that information put in there. And again, it always clarifies which one's coming from listing data and which one's coming from tax records. But let's actually produce a comp analysis for this. If we wanted to refine the value, there's the refine button. We can even go to the refined value tab, which this button brings us to. But in our case, I'm going to use the comp analysis option. And one of the cool things is that regardless of whether or not you have an AVM or an RVM, you can still create a comp analysis, but you can only refine the value if there's already an estimate in place. So I'm going to go over to the comp analysis. And we can see that we've got an option between comparative analysis and a sales comparison analysis. There's a nice video that clarifies the difference between these two. I'm going to keep it simple and just do the comparative analysis. There is a report that actually requires you to do the sales comparison analysis, which is going to be a lot more comprehensive. You're going to have a lot more knowledge and skill to be able to use that. But the comparative analysis is a lot more approachable. We have to confirm our home facts first. So I'll just trust that the listing agent put all the correct information in, confirm facts, and close. If I needed to make any adjustments, I can do so, but again, I'm going to trust that this is all correct. We're going to do our search for comps. And what this allows me to do is, just like we do in Matrix, we can narrow down by the specific property type, what the statuses are. In this case, it already has pre-formatted the active for sale, so anything that's for sale, pending, sold. And let's say that in this case, since we do see that we have a property that's maybe just a little bit overpriced, it might be beneficial to actually see some expired listings as well to kind of augment whether or not we need to show them, look, some of these listings actually expired without being sold because of the fact that they were overpriced, like your property is. Now, hopefully this isn't one of your properties. I'm not I am not a professional realtor, so take this all with a grain of salt. So down here, we've got our date range. Now, because of the fact that I'm working in an area that has relatively high density of properties available and lots of market activity going on, I'm going to limit myself just to the last 6 months. But those of you guys who are working in rural areas, you might want to include maybe a little bit broader scope to your time frame. And then, of course, if that doesn't work, you can also include a broader scope to the area, which I'll show in just a second here. Now, as far as the property details go, maybe I want to include 2 to 3, 2 to 3, or in this case, since it's properties that are, the property already has 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, maybe I want to expand this out to 4. And again, make this decision all based on your property. So your subject property is going to define how I want to do my search. I've got all that information put in. Once I'm happy with making all of my criteria match my subject property, or in this case, my needs, since I'm looking for expired, I hit search. It provides me my list of all the comparable properties, and I can just do the add to comps list to include that in my range. So I'm looking through, this one's been on the market or off market for 80 days. Include that one. Ooh, this one's actually pretty close to the same range as well. Oop, this one's got 3 and 3 as well. Perfect. So I go through and I can include all of those. And actually, while you guys are adding these, you'll notice that there's also a little section right under here that says used in RVM, which means that this particular property's information was actually included in the estimate already. Now, I did find one that looks like down here that was not included in the RVM. But once I'm happy with my list, I'm just going to grab a couple more of these real quick. Here we go. I can double check all of that information here. If I decide, wait a second, this one actually doesn't match, I can remove that. I can just hit my update valuation and close. It also separates these out by what's for sale and what's recently sold. So obviously all of the recently sold properties are up here. And then as I get further down, I see all the stuff that's for sale and also the things that are expired. Here we go. So I can see what the information was here. Let's actually include this one because it looks like it's a little bit nicer property, but it expired anyway, and it had a higher list price. All right, so I've got all that in there. I'm going to hit this update valuation and close, or again, if I'm looking at the top here, I see that same button. So now that I have all my comps included, I can see that I've got a comp analysis. This is just giving me the numbers. So just finding out the average. Somewhere in there, I put in a property that's just under $1 million. Maybe that's not really something I want to include, but I'm going to go ahead and say 490. And we'll average this out to 215 or 930. There we go. Save that. And now that I'm happy with my comp analysis, I'm going to do the create report option. This brings me back to a seller's report. I'm actually going to do the property report instead. And again, this is going to show me my comp analysis right here. And I can also include my comps and adjustments as well, just to make sure that if I did make any adjustments to my comparable properties, I can see that on there. And the property report is going to be at least a little bit shorter. Notice we've only got 29 pages. That's the average again. I'm going to scroll down. I'm not going to include any of the neighborhood information or the school information in there. If I do have somebody that's interested in schools for that area, I can include that. And then there's a manual option not to include the school reviews. Again, if the students really didn't like that property or that school, maybe they're a little too harsh, I can not include that. All right. And I'm going to go down to my delivery method and just do display now, run report. So again, I've got a message that's going to be coming up here at the top. I've got the property being created right now, or the property report being created right now. So I'll hear that ding in a bit here. Now I'm going to go back to the report options. So let's say I have the client and I did my comp analysis. I told them that maybe it was meant to be a little bit higher price than what they actually had it listed for. But now we actually get the opportunity to go out to the property and take a look at it. Or let's say that I'm going to be going out to an open house a little bit later. There's an option here for the property flyer. I get to choose which photo I want to include. Like let's say the interior of the house is really nice. They're going to be going to see it, so I don't need to necessarily include the exterior. So I'll include, looks like this is a nice shot of the house. There we go. And beautiful home. Oh, my report is created, so I got my property report ready. There we go. Put in a headline for this, and I'll leave the rest of that in there. Perfect. All right, I'm going to do the same thing. Just hit run report. And what this is producing for me is just a little flyer that I can bring along with me. So for instance, if I, again, am on a showing tour and my buyer's like, hey, let's take a look at that property across the street, I can send them a little quick flyer that just shows them a lot of information about the house and just a nice, simple version of the information. So it's not as cumbersome as like a 20 or 30 page report. There's also an option here for the mini property report. Notice this one's a lot shorter. Oh, we got our flyer made as well. But we've got our mini property report, which is just going to be a little bit simpler. So for instance, if we do end up going to take a look at this house and that one page isn't going to be enough, they're interested in a lot more information, we can produce a mini property report instead. Now, the valuation workbook is going to be something that requires you to go through that sales comparison analysis. So remember from earlier when we were looking at our options on the comp analysis screen, we can choose the sales comparison analysis. That valuation workbook option is going to require you to go through all of that. Now, there's also a couple other reports. I'm going to show you guys how to produce those when we look at our mobile device. We have the neighborhood report and the school report. And again, both of those have their own separate options. These are going to be more general information that aren't going to be targeted specifically to the property, but instead it's going to be showing information about either the information for that zip code, because again, that's how Oklahoma has everything set up. There's no clearly defined neighborhoods really. And then the same thing with the school report. It's not going to be for that property. And then the market activity report, I'll just show this one briefly. The market activity report is actually going to get the information for this zip code and provide us a lot of information about the estimated home values, what's been happening in the area, sales price, list price, etc. So just giving an overview. The market activity report is really handy for investors. And there's actually a couple relatively new options that have been provided that are really great for helping you guys with investors. Use that help option to learn more about that. All right. So I'm going to go back to my property details, and I've got some reports. Now, if I want to get back to my reports, I'm going to go back to my home page actually. If I want to get back to my reports that I've created, on my home page, I show all of the recent reports that I've created. You can see I've got a bunch of different reports in here. This is the last 30 days worth of reports. And I can even go to each of these individual reports. So for instance, if I had emailed this to them, I can go and take a look at it for myself from here. Let's take a look at this property report that I produced. Again, this one has the CMA that I made. There we go. And as I scroll down here, we've got my comp analysis put nice front and center. Let me zoom out a little bit. Oh, and actually, for some reason, I thought it was in the 30,000 range. It actually looks like I somehow managed to make that pretty close to what the RVM is. We've got our home facts confirmed. A little further down here, it's going to show us our comparable properties. And again, this is going to be the stuff that I manually chose for my comps and adjustments. So here's our expired. There we go. So lots of information on here. Now, when I get down to this map section, you notice how this shows a heat map that shows our estimated home values, 12 months change in estimated home values. There's a lot of cool overlays that are put onto these reports. I wanted to cover quickly how to see those. So whenever we're doing our search, remember how earlier we were just wanting to look at a list of the properties? So I'm going to go back to my search for this area. And when I get to my search for an area, again, whether it's all properties, for lease, for sale, I always get this map option. Actually, let me make this full screen so you guys can actually see this. At the top of the map, we have the draw a shape, use a map pin, a custom area, or show geographies. All of these are going to allow you to narrow down your search to either a specific area, use a pin, maybe define a custom area. Notice we have an option to create a new area, or we can include the zip codes, cities, counties, all of those lines on the map. So similar to the same functions that you guys have access to in Matrix. But those heat maps are going to be the same thing that you guys are working with in Matrix and Realist as well. Down here at the bottom right of the map, we can add in the heat maps, which shows our estimated home values. You can see that there's a nice dark splotch a little bit south of here. You can actually watch that increase go from 35 or 355 to 1.5 million. Same thing with this area up here. We've also got the estimated value per square foot. The one that everybody is always interested in, though, is that flood zones. So for instance, that property that we were looking at earlier, the 1373. Oops, where's my zoom function? There it is. It's right over here. Yeah, so we can see that it's in a flood zone. Now, the map that they're, or the, excuse me, the legend that it's added here, it's not giving us the FEMA designations, but it is going to show us at least whether it's in a high risk area. If you guys do need more information about that, you can go to FEMA.gov. You can find out what the exact designation is of this. And I think we also have that in Realist and Matrix as well. All right. Get out of full screen. And we'll take a look now at the property flyer. So again, this was the one page that we produced. It produced really quickly as well, so we can jump right into it and take a look at this. Again, this is really helpful information if you guys are going to an open house. You can print out a bunch of these. Again, it's got your name and information on there. And you can find all of that information handed out to people. It's nice, pre-formatted. It's got a nice photo built into it, the map to show some context, the public remarks here as well. So whatever the agent put in, and we can manually change this if we need to, if we have something we would like to highlight. All right. So we've done a lot of cool stuff on the desktop version. Now I want to bring you guys to the mobile version of the app, and I'm going to show you guys a couple of other features that, again, are going to be in both places. But I'm going to go back to my homepage. So again, we have our recent properties that we've looked at, recent searches, and recent reports. I'm going to pull up the app on my phone. Uh-oh. It's going to give me some trouble connecting again, isn't it? No? Ah, perfect. Okay. I tried to make sure that this was all connected earlier, and it was. Okay, perfect. So we're going to look at, make this a little bit more screen appropriate. So when I'm on my home page on the desktop, I have access to my recent properties, my recent searches, and my recent reports. On the home page of the app, I can see that I've got the recent reports, recent searches, and then all of my saved properties as well. So I can jump back into any of the stuff that I've saved, any of the recent searches and properties that I've looked up, as well as all of my reports that I can produce quickly. So if I click on that recent button down at the bottom there, I can jump back into any of the properties that I was looking at. So for instance, I produced the CMA for that Swan Drive. You'll notice that's right up here at the top. I also had been looking at that Norfolk Avenue property. That's showing up here. When we were talking about the Brownwoods property, that's showing up right here. And if we find something that we like, so for instance, if I had been looking at that Swan Drive property and my buyer is really interested in this, when I'm looking at the property in the desktop version, again, we had all these cool buttons, everything that we could do with it. There's a save button over here on the right-hand side. And in the mobile app, if I click on that property, down at the bottom right-hand corner, we see that same star. And when we click on that star, we can save this property and we can give it a specific name. So Gerard's Dream House. Perfect. Save with custom name, and I'm good to go. So now when I need to work with this property again in the future, it'll actually have that information available to me saved as a favorite, so that the next time I jump in here, I can see that I've got Gerard's Dream House. It shows me my address, and I can start working again from there. And again, on my home page from the desktop version, if I go to the saved section, I can see all of those properties that I saved as a saved favorite. So I can jump back into Gerard's Dream House and it'll show me that information. But let's take a look at something different. We have our searches that we've done as well. So again, on our home page, we have all of our recent searches. So we can jump back into something. So for instance, let's say that I'm out on the road with Gerard and he's taking a look at other properties. Again, I can just click on the recent search that I had done to see if there was anything else in that particular area. So if you wanted to go tour those other properties as well, we can jump right back into that search, and it actually shows my location, so I can plot a course directly to that property if need be. Now, we also have the option, I'll go back here, when we're looking at the searches on mobile, it brings us our map right away. But just like when we're on desktop, if we want to take a look at the list, we just need to make the map smaller. On mobile, there's actually a button right up here at the top that brings us back to our list. There we go. Now, let's say that we do have an investor. Gerard's an investor. He's trying to find a property that might be able to suit his needs to make a property for renting. Let's say that he's interested now in the market activity report for this particular area. So again, the 74120. So I'm going to go back to my home page. And we can do a market activity report from one of the home pages that they have. So when you get into the mobile app, there's 3 different home pages. I'm swiping between them right now, and it works the same way that it works on your home page for the apps. So for instance, if I'm looking at the home page for my apps, I've still got those little icons, those dots down at the bottom. So it works the same way whether you guys are on Android or iPhone. But when you're in RPR, you have those same exact options. So down here at the bottom, it shows those 3 dots. You can save a particular homepage as your favorite as well. So for instance, if you guys want to see the inventory for the area that you're in, that's the default homepage. So this is where you guys should land the first time you actually get into the RPR app, and it'll show me properties within half a mile. If you click on that, it'll just show you a radius for you to be able to see around. But if you find that maybe you like this particular homepage instead, or if you like the one that shows the market conditions for that particular area, you can save those as a home page permanently by holding down the home icon up at the top right corner. So like, let's say that I'm dealing with a lot of investors, or I'm always searching for my listings to send people reports. Maybe I like this homepage the best. I hold down that homepage button up at the top right, and it'll say default homepage set. So if I ever come back into RPR, so if I've closed out of it and I jump back into it, it'll remember that that's the page that I would like to get back to. And in my opinion, I really like this one the best, but if you guys really like the inventory option because you're only ever using the RPR app when you're out looking at properties, this might be really handy. You can just jump directly into what properties are for sale in your vicinity, and it'll show you what's available. But I'm gonna hit my home button up at the top right again. In our case, again, we're trying to do a market report for our investors. So Gerard wants to know what this area is like. So I'm gonna click on this area. It looks like I've got all of my home areas, and I'm instead going to do a search for that zip code, 74120. It does a search for the area, and this is showing me a lot more information than I had before because I didn't clarify that I wanted it to be for sale. And I've got the reports button down here at the bottom, which allows me to jump right back into producing a specific report. Now, because of the fact that I had done a general search, it's actually not showing me those other options that are going to be specifically for properties. So notice we don't have the option for property report, seller's report, property flyer, any of those. It's only giving me those 2 options, market activity and neighborhood report. So my market activity report is the one that he was interested in. And when we were going through and creating reports on the desktop, remember how there was that more details where we can check or uncheck which parts and pieces of the report we want to include? It gives us the same option on mobile. It's just this toggle between, do we want to include all the report sections, yes or no? And if I hit no, I can go through and find each of the parts and pieces that I want to include the same way that I would do if I were to produce a report here. So if I go to create a report for this area, do my market activity report, and go to more details, it's got all of the same functions and options that we had from there. Now, again, on my mobile device though, I'm going to just include all of them. And up at the top, we've got our next. Just notice this works like a wizard, step 1, 2, and 3. So I hit next up at the top, and I'm actually going to email this report to Gerard. Obviously not his real email address. There we go, and get report. Excellent. So it's going to tell me that I've got my report generating. I can quickly get back to creating more reports or see my recent reports. I'm just going to exit this. And let's say that we are actually going about and we've gotten Gerard to start taking a look at things. I'm across the street looking at a property with him that's for sale, and he points across the street at some house that happens to be for sale by owner. So it's not going to have any listing information in the system, but he does want to at least see the property's information, so the property details for something that's off market. So I can either search by the address. Again, we can type in the address if we know it, but in my case, I actually just want to localize my search just down to that specific area. So I'm going to click on the properties within half a mile of me. I'm actually going to zoom in. Let's find a blank spot where there's, here we go, perfect. So we've got some properties in this area, but if you notice, it's not doing the same thing that Matrix or Realist does when you zoom into the map. It's not showing our parcel lines. But if I click on this redo search in this area, what that allows me to see is all of the parcels in this area, whether it's on market or off market. So now, if I wanted to click on that house that was across the street, I just tap on the property and it shows me the information down here at the bottom. And I can click on this information down at the bottom to jump directly into that property. And this will show me all the property details about it. And I can scroll through this. Notice we've got our map up here at the top that shows us the parcel dimensions and its specifications. If this had a listing, again, just like we saw earlier, it'll show the photos. We've got the AVM, it looks like. Some location details. If we wanted to see the map a little larger to get more context, maybe find out directions to this property or check the traffic in the area. We can do a search for any of the nearby properties that are for sale, find any comps, or even just go through the whole create a comp analysis process. So even though we aren't on desktop, we can still create those comp analysis, sales comparison analysis, even do refining of the property's value. All of that can be done from mobile. Oh, we have a question. What did you click to search on the first screen? Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of missed a step there, didn't I? When I clicked, it was just this button right up here at the top, the properties within half a mile of me. So again, this is just pretending that I'm out and about with Gerard. If I click on that within half a mile of me, it'll show my dot on the map where I'm located. And again, if I zoom in onto the specific area, like again, I don't want to show my exact address, but if I zoom in to see what the property is across the street, I can click on it to find the information. But again, in my case, I had an off market that I was going to look at. Let me jump back into that. So I went back to my home page, went back to my recent, and again, this is the property that I was just looking at right up here. There we go. And I can see all of our facts, all of our information. This is also a great place to go if you guys are working with property that's going to be listed. So again, you're out and about, you're talking with somebody, they take you to their house, they're showing you around. Maybe the public information isn't correct and there's no listing information on it quite yet. You can go into the mobile app, you find their off-market property, and you can go to your changes to start documenting all of the changes that you need to make to that property whenever you guys get the listing information put in. And I'll show you guys more about that in just a moment. We see all of our other information, the prior sales, the schools in the area, mortgage records. So again, all of the exact same information that we were just looking at on the desktop version, but condensed into the mobile version now. And if I wanted to produce a report so that I can give Gerard some more information about this property, I can just go to the reports. And again, same options that I had. This time, instead of finding just the stuff for the market activity in the neighborhood, since we were searching for a zip code, now I have access to property reports, seller's information, even the school report information. So we can go through, let's say that we just wanted to give them a little flyer about the information. There's no photos for this property since there wasn't a listing, and I haven't added any photos yet, so we don't have to worry about that. We can just go through, everything's fine here, hit next. Oh, I need to put in a headline. Ta-da. No, that's not ta. Perfect. It's a little bit more cumbersome with the off-market stuff because there's not any information in here. If this were a listed property, then the public remarks would be put in there and you'd only have to put in the headline. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna head back to my home page. So we just produced a report for Gerard about that particular property. So I'm gonna go back to my reports. Oops, not my reports screen, the recent, and go back to the reports section, which is right up here at the top. And I can see my market activity report that I had produced for him. I can view that report right here on my screen. Again, this was one that I had emailed to him. So even though I emailed this to him originally, I still have access to getting back into that report to take a look at what information I had passed along to him. All right. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the home page. Oh, that's right. I apologize. The one more step that I skipped over when I went to try and produce a report. I'm going to jump back into that same property we were just looking at. Let's say that we do end up deciding that he wants to try and get this all set up. And let's say that this was an off-market property that the seller wants to put on the market. So again, I can go through and I can start noting all of the changes to the property. But let's say that I actually want to start putting in some extra notes about the property. So for instance, if I wanted to get all of the changes to what the public record information has, this is where we document that, is under the home facts. But if I need to start making my own notes, so things like, all right, the kitchen needs to be remodeled, the house has some problems with the foundation, things like that, or even adding photos, or if I even just wanted to make a recording, a voice recording of me conversing with the seller and getting all of that information for me to transcribe later. There's a notes button down here at the bottom. So instead of doing the reports or saving it as a favorite for me to come back to later, I'm actually just going to click on notes. And this allows me to add a variety of different notes to this property. So I've got the add a note, which is just going to be text. There we go. Save that. We also have an option to add a photo. So we can take a photo if we want to. Please take a photo. There it goes. Take a photo of the property. Perfect. No. So we got a photo. And then I can also add a voice memo as well. And this one's relatively simple. You just start a recording. It keeps all of that information in your profile attached to your account. So I can go back and review that later. Save that. Yep. Now, with the photos and the notes that I've added, there's also another option in here, include in reports. And if you do end up wanting to include some things like, for instance, maybe I don't want them to know that I have marked that down. They already saw the inspection report. It's kind of insult to injury to keep on seeing it over and over again. I can just uncheck that checkbox so that it only includes that for my benefit. Then I don't have to worry about, having to remind them over and over again. And then once I'm done with this, if I want to, I can produce the reports, or I can go back to my property details. And again, we can start doing the listing information, get that there's 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and I'm good. Make sure to save that data. And again, since we've added all that information into the system, I get back to my computer later that day, and I can see that all of that information has actually been attached to that property. So I load up RPR on my computer again. I'm coming back and I'm going to start doing the listing agreement for this property. So I jump back into this off-market property that we were just working with. I've got a refined value just because, again, the AVM is going to grab the details that I changed right here. And it's already made some adjustments to it. And then the notes that I've added as well. Notes are going to be showing up here, property notes. Notice we've got our foundation needs work. We've got our property photo that we have, and we even have our voice memo that I can go back and download as well, so I can listen to it. We can listen to the transcription or transcribe whatever the seller was saying, all that. So again, a lot of these options are going to be the exact same functions whether you guys are doing it on desktop or mobile. Now, One of the cool things about RPR is whenever you guys are actually working in RPR, there's always going to be a lot of options for learning how to do things. So for instance, if I'm wanting to try and find out more about how to create a report, or if I'm looking at a screen and I'm not entirely sure what this screen is for, or what the information is, again, let's try the charts section, because charts has a lot of information, very, very dense. If I go to about this data, it shows me about this data, but what am I going to be using some of this information for? What am I actually going to be gleaning from the history of this particular property? There's going to be some buttons up at the top right corner. We've got a contextual learning button, and we've got a help button down at the bottom right corner. Both of these are going to allow us to jump back into any of the specific functions that we need. So for instance, if I'm looking at my home page and I'm wanting to find out, like, all right, what do I do from here? Like, where do I go from here? You guys finally get into RPR, and some of this information has already fallen out the back of your head. You haven't gone back to look at the recording of the webinar, and you want to just find out, all right, what can I do from here? There's this contextual learning button. When you click on this, it shows you videos. So for instance, we've got one that's actually labeled on your first visit. There's options to create mailing labels. They've got a video for that. There's a bunch of other videos down here, maybe tutorials, webinars, questions about how to use this, even some insights. And there's even options down here for view more ways to learn. So all of this is actually going to be kept on a screen by screen basis. So like if I'm going back to look at Gerard's house and I wanted to find out what to do with this particular page, all these details, the summary, etc. I click on that contextual learning button. I can start learning how to price it, how to do a quick print, sizing up the property details page, which covers all of the different options that you have available. If I go over to the refined value page, there's going to be some contextual learning for this that's going to be more specifically for how to price the property, creating compelling listing presentations. So again, if I'm working with a listing information, I can actually get that all done. I've got a 4.5 minute long video that shows me how to do that. So they try to make sure that all of those options are available, especially when you guys are on desktop. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have access to that on that additional information on mobile. On mobile, it's just going to be hidden under this little cogwheel icon over on the left-hand side. And there you can see that they've got frequently asked questions, they've got guides, we've got the phone number, which is going to be the same group. If you scroll to the very bottom of the screen, we've got the phone number here too. So if you get out and about, and you're taking a look at the app and you're like, wait a second, I don't know what I'm doing, you can actually phone into them. They're available 24/7, and they can always answer any questions that you guys have, even if you guys are looking at your screen and trying to figure out how to do something right then and there. Oh, and actually, Brian is asking, could we show the difference between off-market and the actively selected property? So if we have, actually here, I'll do another search. So I'll do a search for all properties, and we'll do that same zip code that we've been using. There we go. So when I'm looking at the search, this provides me just the non-distressed, distressed, for sale, etc. But it is going to be showing me everything that's in here. These things that are going to be off market are usually going to be pretty explicitly labeled. And then anything that is on market will have a different color to that. And if we're looking at the map will actually show those different icons as well. So if we zoom in a little bit, I can see all of the different parcels. And if there's one that I kind of zoomed in on an area that doesn't have a lot going on. Let's do this area. There we go. So now we're actually looking at this area. I can do a search for these properties instead. We'll do the redo search as map moves. Let me make this full screen because this is getting a little hard to see. There we go. All right, so now I can see all of the different properties that are in this particular area. Actually, maybe I'm not understanding your question. The off-market activity versus the actively selected properties? You know what? I'm going to get in contact with you after class since we're so close to the end of class, and I'll get some clarification on what you mean by that. And Adrian, I'll do the same for you. I'll get in touch with you after class just to make sure that we've gotten everything we need here. But let me jump into this. So again, if you guys do end up needing to learn more about RPR, obviously we've got the recording available. RPR has webinars of their own. They've got tutorial videos, guides, all sorts of stuff. Again, remember that contextual learning button is going to show you guys on each page that you're on. There might be some videos that are available. Click on that button to show you what's going to be available for this particular function that you're looking at. Again, notice it's changing on each page. And if you guys want to get started there, you guys can go directly to narrpr.com, or you guys can go directly to the MLS portal and find out more about the functions from there. There are video tutorials at blog.narrpr.com if you guys just want to go to the training options that are available. There's a whole bunch of learning that's available. If you guys click on the learning button up at the top right corner, there's video tutorials, webinars, ebooks, quick start guides, all sorts of information on there. I love a lot of these tutorials that they have. In fact, actually, most of the way that I ended up learning how to use RPR was through these tutorials that they provided. So lots of lessons, lots of topics that they cover. You can find out the timestamps of each of those. But if you guys do end up needing any assistance at all, you guys can get directly in contact with RPR. They have a 24/7 phone number. Make sure to get in contact with them if you need any assistance with RPR. If you guys are having trouble getting into RPR from the MLS side, obviously you can always reach out to us. But most of the time, it's just going to be getting you signed in. And the last thing I wanted to cover, since we're a little bit over on class, if you guys do end up wanting to look at RPR based on a property that you guys have found in Matrix, we always have a link for every single property, no matter what it is. Every single property in the MLS is going to have a link that goes directly to RPR's property details for it. So for instance, if you guys find a, let's just do this one. If you guys find a property in the system and you want to find out more about it in RPR, there's a button right over here on the right-hand side. Or if you guys are looking at the listing details, there's a button right underneath here. And notice we got 1140 West Florence. If I click on RPR, it'll bring me directly into the information in RPR. We can create reports and do whatever we need. But I'm a little bit over on class, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. If you guys do end up having any questions, I'll stick around. Class is officially over though for now. So if you guys do end up having anything you would like to add, ask, now's the time. But I'm going to get in contact with, let's see, Adrian. Perfect. And Brian. All right, perfect. All right. Excellent. Yeah, thank you guys. Oh, gotcha. Oh, and actually, Lori, I'll go ahead and put this back in there. And you should be able to unmute yourself. Oh, there you go. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well.
Did you see my question?
I'm trying to sort through these. How do you look up what zip codes are likely to move to a particular area?
Yeah, I heard that RPR has that technology and probably has something to do with the census.
Maybe I'm not understanding what you mean.
I thought that there was I think it's based off of the census information. So like people
Gotcha.
from Colorado or, like specifically Denver are the most geographic state moving to Tulsa or Broken Arrow, or most people are moving from Florida or Iowa or You know, like
Yeah.
where people are moving from.
And that's actually all going to be found under the neighborhood information. So for instance, it's going to separate it down, obviously in Oklahoma, I've mentioned it so many times, I think, that it's going to just break it down into the zip code. And when you go to the neighborhood information, you can always do the search from your home screen as well.
Okay.
There we go. This shows us the summary of, what's happening in the area, housing situation. But there is a section here for people, which shows a lot of the demographic information that I think you might be looking for.
And does it show where people are moving from?
I remember seeing something similar to that. Occupational categories, no. I might have to double check on that because I remember I remember seeing a report about that. Yeah, I'll double check on that and I'll follow up with you.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, I'll get back in contact with you as soon as I find out where you can find that information because I remember seeing something about that, but I wasn't certain it was in RPR. But I'll double check for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And Lynn, I see that you asked about the registration process. When you get to, oh, and actually, you know what? I've got an account that is, let's do private window. Got an account that actually isn't connected to RPR, so I can actually show you what that looks like. The registration process is actually relatively easy. Again, all you'll need in advance is actually going to be the information specifically for your NAR membership. So if you go to RPR without having registered yet, it'll bring you to the correct page, and there's going to be an option to, there it goes, create a new account. And all this requires of you is your last name and, again, the email address that you've registered with NAR, or your NERDS ID if you have it already. Now, if you don't have that information, you can always get in contact with us, or more specifically, if you wanted to get some assistance from NAR, you can contact them here. But I would suggest trying to collect that information in advance just to make sure that you have it. And it's always a good idea to have your NRDS ID written down somewhere anyway, just in case. But again, that's it. That's the whole registration process, is getting this in here, and then there's a couple extra steps after that, but it's really easy. All right. And Rhonda, yes, you will be receiving a recording of today's class.